You know, if I had an actual official, like, end of the year award show, I'd probably call it the Mikeys, but I hate that. So instead, I'm just going to give them numbers 1 through 10. Let's do that now. Hey, what's up, bookworms? It's time to wrap up 2020 by talking about the best books that I read this year, and it was quite a list to dwindle down. You know, I read 73 books this year. I have a feeling that's going to go down next year. By the way, if you're curious about that and you haven't actually like friended me or checked me out on Goodreads, you can hit that link below. But I'll also post and then I'll pin the comment of all 73 books that I read this year in case you want to look through that and see like, hey, you know what? That's a comic book. That doesn't count or something like that. It happens, guys. But guys, here we are ready to wrap up the year. I'm going to be talking about my 10 favorite books that I read this year. It was actually a lot harder to put together than I thought. I had to make some tough cuts. That's why I'm going to go ahead and start this off with a couple of honorable mentions. First, I'm going to talk about both books written by Evan Winter that I read this year. That was Rage of Dragons and The Fires of Vengeance. Rage of Dragons was the very first read-along that I did on this channel. So I think I'll always have some fond memories of it for that, but it was a very good debut, and I think Fires of Vengeance just kind of built upon that. Neither one I would call good enough to crack my top 10 because I got some really heavy hitters in there, but it was definitely, I like the direction that his universe is going, and as a first-time author, I really like what he has done to kind of differentiate himself from a lot of, traditional modern fantasy. He's done really, really great ideas with that. By the way, for this list, one book per author. I didn't want to let any authors kind of dominate this list. So there might be some where I'd be like, you know what? I really liked more books by this one author, but I wanted to make sure I put just one book by author and no rereads. No rereads count. That's why I don't have Stephen King in the top 10 for the first time in a while. But I do have one as an honorable mention. This was The Outsider by Mr. King. It's one of those books where I was just blown away in that I can't believe that this man is still writing content this good at his age. I had a great time with this book. The HBO series kind of dropped the ball, but this is about the book. I really, really enjoyed the book. I thought it was one of the better detective stories that he's written since he's kind of went into that detective mode, because it kind of mixed some of his best style, of the supernatural with some of his new like crime stuff that he's really, really into. Very, very good book. Very quick read. This one, it's kind of unfair not to put it in the top 10 because I think I enjoyed it enough. But it's the last book that I read, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't any recency bias. So this one's really just kind of falling a victim of, when I read it. But I want to make sure that I give Richard Nell his props here. Kings of Paradise, this was phenomenal. I can't wait to read books 2 and 3. It's one where I said I think it's the most bleak fantasy world, but not like straight nihilism, like just good grimdark. It's the most bleak fantasy world I've visited since First Law and Song of Ice and Fire. Very cool. I can't wait to see how it keeps going with books 2 and 3. And the fact that the series is done, that helps a lot. So if I'd read this early in the year, I'd probably have it in my top 10. But like I said, I don't want to let the recency bias kind of play into it there. That's something I think I might have to revisit later and see if it will crack in. But let's go ahead and start the countdown here with number 10. I actually had this gentleman on the channel recently, and I actually did a review for book 1. And that was, of course, Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. I think that this is one that has gotten a lot of interesting comparisons to some books that I love, some books that I don't love. A lot of people say it's like Dune meets Name of the Wind. To me, I said imagine the Red Rising saga if written by Patrick Rothfuss, because Mr. Ruocchio is a wordsmith, if ever there was one I could think of. I'm just blown away by his use of the English language, because I'm not really a guy that's usually floored by prose. Yeah, it's nice, but it's not like mandatory for me, but his is some of the best that I've seen, and seeing that kind of given to the sci-fi genre was a breath of fresh air. I really did enjoy it, and I think that you guys would like it too. So that's why I did that interview with him, because I want more people to learn about this series, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. I'm reading book 2 in February and book 3 in March. The only reason I was supposed to do January, February, March, but I actually moved that one up because I was feeling a little bit of fantasy burnout, so I kind of moved that one up. Let's go on to number 9. You guys know I made it through the Wheel of Time for the first time this year, and I think I started with book number 9, which was Winter's Heart as far as in 2020, so I wasn't counting anything before that, clearly. But of that group, I went with The Gathering Storm. I think that this might be a top 5 Wheel of Time book for me. I know that I did my tier list for that, And yes, I know you guys love tier lists, but I wasn't going to tier list 73 books. With this, it was just when I started thinking about it over time, I thought that I liked Knife of Dreams more. But I started thinking about it. I was like, way more stuff happened in that. You got lots of nice conclusions to some threads that have been hanging for numerous books. It was, that kind of, not really a breath of fresh air, because I did think that Robert Jordan really did turn it around before he left us. And I know a lot of this book is still him, but I think that Brandon Sanderson kind of breathed a new life into it that I felt like I needed, because the series might have started to feel like it was getting a little stale. And there was enough stuff, enough resolutions that I really liked this. That's why the one that I'm going to pick there. I know most people are probably going to go with Memory of Light or something like that, but Gathering Storm is just phenomenal in every way. There was never a part of that book where I was like, okay, those later Wheel of Time books I can go through and be like, yeah, you could have cut that part out, could have cut this in. I like that whole book. So many good revelations, so many good character arcs come to a close in a satisfying way. And I just can't say enough about it. As time goes by, I think I'm liking it even more. And for sure, top 5 Wheel of Time book for me. Let's go on to number 8. Now, this was a series that I got a lot of pushback with because of Wheel of Time. A lot of fans were really, really critical on this series. And number 8 is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. First-time author, and a lot of the criticism I got was like, well, he's not as good as Brandon Sanderson. Well, no shit. I know he's not going to be as good as maybe the best in the game right now. And then the other comparison was Wheel of Time. Now, I can't see the Wheel of Time comparison at all with this book, except one feature, which I'm going to do a video here in the new year. I'm going to call it the good and the bad of the Lycania trilogy, because I felt like there was a lot of things I really liked about it, and there's some things I think might hold it back for people. And my initial thoughts on it was like, look, I really like this trilogy, and I highly recommend it to you. I just don't recommend it like busting your TBR like it did for me. These are 3 thick books, but I'll get into it. As far as what I liked about Shadow of What Was Lost, it was just a really complex but really well written and well thought out series, starting with this first book. And I actually think that's one, those people who read Wheel of Time and talk about how you got to reread it, I think rereading Lycania someday will be a whole new experience, because there are so many things that are foreshadowed in book 1, and you get to book 3 and you're like, oh my god. But yeah, as far as a debut goes, that's one of the best I can't remember reading lately in the fantasy genre that just, he completely floored me. Yes, there are some problems with his writing style and stuff like that. Again, first-time author, but I feel like he's been kind of judged unfairly because of the comparisons to Wheel of Time and Brandon Sanderson. I think that might be a reason a lot of people put this down, but definitely one of the best books I read this year, and I loved that universe. Speaking of a universe I love the Right Era universe, guys. Number 7 is Theft of Swords. This is books 1 and 2 of Right Era Revelations. That's a Crown Conspiracy and Avampartha. I read these at the very beginning of the year. It was my first book that I read this year, and I loved it. Here's the thing about it, is I felt like it was kind of like traditional, like 1980s fantasy, but not without those tropes. So it's like, imagine if you were reading like Shannara back then, but it was completely fresh ideas. I really found that comparison apt, and in a good way. Look, I don't hate Terry Brooks like everybody else does. I think that it seems like he was very much influenced by Mr. Brooks in a way that he can build his world without giving you like 200-page info dumps. So he builds his world slowly through these first 2 books in a very, very satisfying way, that you're getting all the information that you need, but he's not overwhelming you with it, and the action is just top notch. I mean, and then you got your duo of Royce and Hadrian, probably the best duo in all of fantasy. I love these 2 guys together. Anytime they are on the page, the books just soar. And I had a hell of a time with these, and I don't know why I haven't finished Right Era Revelations yet. I finished the first 4, so I got 2 left. But that'll be happening sometime next year, I am sure. At number 6, I think you need a good palate cleanser once in a while, especially when you read a lot of epic fantasy. You need something to kind of break up the monotony, and that's why I decided to go with The Martian by Andy Weir. This one was actually chosen by you guys. I put it up for a voters poll, and this one won rather easily. And it was one that I had wanted to read for a while. It's just I ended up seeing the movie before I read it, so it kind of moved it down my list. But I'd always wanted to get to it, but I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. I reviewed it recently. You can tell in that review about how much I really, really love this, and it was going to be one of my favorite books that I read this year. This is one I can see myself rereading again, because it was just such a good time. Doesn't require a ton of commitment. It's going to be a crowd pleaser. It's going to be tense. It's going to make you laugh. It's going to make you maybe cry. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot up more than this book shows on the surface. There's a lot more heart in this book than you would think. And I had just a blast with it. And so much so that I'd like to visit some more of Andy Weir's stuff. I've heard kind of mixed things on other books that he's done post The Martian. But apparently this next book he's coming out is supposed to be a little more in that same kind of vein. So we'll see. It's kind of always tough when you have that first book be a big hit. It's always people waiting for you to be like, oh yeah, well, why don't you write another Martian? And then when he writes another Martian, like, why don't you do something different? So it's kind of a curse when you have that first one be a big hit. But I'm interested in checking out some of his other stuff as well as I am with number 5, and that is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I can't tell you how much I needed this book in 2020. I was kind of stuck in a rut when I got to this point. I was just starting to get to that point where I felt some fantasy burnout. I did split that up a little bit when I read Empire of Silence. I moved Empire of Silence up because I was feeling some fantasy burnout. And then when Rhythm of War came out, which is a good book, but guys, you know that a Sanderson book is a heavy read, right? So I read this before I moved on to the next book, and it was perfect. It was just what I needed to kind of knock off the monotony, I guess, of what I had been kind of doing for a while, because it was just so much fun, so entertaining. I loved this group that he put together. The 5 guys in that group that he has, the band, they are all so lovable. You want to fight with them. You want to get a beer with them. You want to listen to some rock music with them, because yes, there are so many classic rock references in a way that's not like, not like in like a Ready Player One way where it's like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's those kind of things where, like, if you have knowledge of 70s classic rock, you're going to be like, I see what you did there. That's really clever. I love that kind of stuff. And I said it was almost kind of like in a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy way, in that it was serious, but I still found myself, chuckling every few paragraphs. So there's really some of the best internal monologue outside of a Joe Abercrombie dark humor kind of way that I've read in a while. And I definitely am glad that some of the people on the Discord really, really pressured me to read that book when I did, because it was one that I was just kind of putting off till next year. But I'm glad I moved it up. So much so that I'm upset that book 2 I won't be getting the same group. It's going to be a new band. That kind of upsets me. But again, it doesn't take away from how great of a book that is. Number 4, might be surprised to see it this low. If this is low, number 4, it's just a really strong year. This is The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie, book 2 in his Age of Madness trilogy, the sequel trilogy to the original First Law. It was one I felt like it improved on book 7 in every way. The characters that I was lukewarm in on A Little Hatred, I felt like he improved them in this one. He does use a couple of plot writing devices that I think might have gotten stale at this point, but he makes up with that with a lot of the same twists and turns that you've come to know and love in the First Law universe. Lots of character manipulation in that one in a way that I felt like he hadn't really gotten into yet. I mean, you'd seen that before. Obviously, you have your big culprit in the first trilogy. If you've read that, you know who I'm talking about. I still don't want to ruin that because not enough of you guys have read the First Law, apparently. But yeah, Abercrombie's as sharp as ever. He is as grimdark as ever. And yeah, this one has points of they're so dark with grimdark, like you'll need to make sure you have like 2 lights on instead of 1. That's how dark he gets sometimes in this book, but never at a point that's not enjoyable, never at a point that doesn't have the political intrigue that you come to expect from Abercrombie. And yeah, there's some characters in there. I said that they were so manipulative that they made Cersei Lannister look like a Disney princess. That's how manipulative they were, and it was just really, really well done. And it was a big plot in that book I did not expect to see happen, and then resolved in that book. So it almost kind of stands alone in that way. But yeah, guys, if you have read the First Law trilogy and you haven't gotten the sequel trilogy, I mean, at this point I say wait because book 3 comes out next September. But if you're looking for something to scratch that grimdark itch, that's going to do it for you. Number 3, it's a Brandon Sanderson book, guys, but it's not the one that you're thinking of. No, it's not Rhythm of War. You guys know that I did do the entire Cosmere, except some short stories, except for White Sand. All of the big ones, though, I did them all this year. But some of the best ones, namely the Stormlight books, I wasn't rereading those this year. And again, rereads don't count. So I didn't read those this year. But it's not Rhythm of War, guys. It is Warbreaker. Yes, this is the leather-bound edition in case you don't have it. It's beautiful. It's glorious. I love it. Warbreaker is a book that completely caught me off guard. I felt like I had heard so many mixed things about it. I wasn't really sure what to expect. And I think besides Stormlight Archive, this is the favorite book, my favorite book that Brandon Sanderson wrote. Probably a top 3 book for me. I'd say I'd go Words of Radiance, then I'd go Way of Kings, and then Warbreaker as far as my 3 favorite Brandon Sanderson books. This was so much fun, and the tie-ins with Stormlight Archive are what I didn't expect. There's a huge one, and I mean, there's some twists and turns in here that really just absolutely devastated me. Vivenna quickly became one of my favorite characters in all of the Cosmere. I think she is amazing, and I hope we see more of her. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Brandon Sanderson, because you know he's watching this, right? But yeah, there are characters in that I'd love to see again, characters in that you have seen again. So it's a really, really cool tie-in. If you love Stormlight Archive and you haven't read Warbreaker yet, I really think that you should. That's a top 3 book for me of 2020, and a book that I read 73 books in. So I mean, that's high praise, and I can't say enough about how much I enjoyed that book, and I didn't expect to. So it was a very, very pleasant surprise. I did have my problems with the ending, but I think those problems have kind of died down a little bit since I finished it. I did my review like immediately after that when I said it was a 5-star book with a 2-star ending. I'd probably not be that cruel on it at this point. It wasn't that it was a bad ending, it was a quick ending. So don't let that deter you from reading it if you haven't yet. I think you'd like it quite a bit. 2020, if it wasn't the year of the Cosmere, it was the year of the Dresden Files. I read Stormfront in December, and so I read 2 through 17 this year. So picking a favorite Dresden Files book at number 2, you ever have a book that has so much hype, there's no way it can meet it? Well, that wasn't Changes, because Changes had the hype and it exceeded the hype. It was absolutely everything it was billed as. A lot of times you'll hear, oh, that's the best book in the series, and you get to it, maybe it's because your expectations are so high, you're just kind of like, it was fine. No, this was absolutely 100% as advertised. I actually did a reaction video. People wanted me to do a reaction video of the last 2 chapters, and it was how Jim Butcher actually found the channel, and said it was very satisfying as an author to see that reaction. And it met the hype in every way, guys. It is just a fantastic read, and then there's stuff that happens after that, the revelations that happen that make this book even better in hindsight. So, guys, it's just absolutely worth the journey. I think, if anything, I see now, when I first started reading it, people are like, well, you got to get the Changes. I'm like, well, shit, I got 11 books before then. But, I can see why, because it absolutely exceeded those expectations in every way. And it would have been number 1 if there wasn't one that I just could not say was not my favorite book of the year. And number 1, you might have guessed it by now, Ruin by John Gwynne. The hardest thing about this list was picking one book from The Faithful and the Fallen, because I thought all 4 books were superb. But you're doing a list like this, and you only want to put one in here. I'd have to go with Ruin. Had some of my favorite moments in it. Had the darkest, most gutting ending I have read in a while. And it's phenomenal, guys. If you haven't read John Gwynne, please do. This book right here, man. You see these books, you see how beefy they are, man, you will just fly through them. I read all 4 of them while splitting time with other stuff in 2 months, because they were just so good. It was something that I read right after I finished Wheel of Time, kind of dealing with the postpartum of Wheel of Time, and it was just perfect. What I've said was, it's not like A Song of Ice and Fire, but I think A Song of Ice and Fire fans will like it. And with Ruin, you just had so many big character moments that you've been waiting for those first 2 books, and when you get them in this, they're just so satisfying. But again, there's also a lot of darkness. There's a lot of things that happen in that book that you're just like, you're stunned, you're blown away by, and I don't think that you ever see many of them coming. And again, that ending is just an absolute dagger through your heart. It's really that good, because you've connected with those characters so much, and when you see bad things happen to people, it's rough, man. But yeah, great year. I know I was really heavily on fantasy this year. I'm going to try to aim more into sci-fi, horror, and fantasy as a nice balance. Next year, that's really the goal. But as the ones I read this year, they weren't rereads and only going by one author. That is definitely the way that I would put it. Guys, let me know what your top 10 are. I would prefer to hear what your top 10 are. Besides hearing why mine suck, I always would prefer to hear what yours are. But again, I'm not immune to criticism. Please let me know why or how you disagree with me below. Or, like I said, just let me know what your favorite reads of this year are. How many books did you read this year? As always, there are no wrong answers, guys. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you in the comments.